Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast.
Before we get into today's conversation, Canada Growth Network. Here's the math. A full CRM, email marketing, funnels, and automations for less than a coffee a day. That's $47 a month Canadian with a $1 trial to start. If you're building a business and still duct taping tools together, check the link in the show notes.
I have been in sales my entire life, starting, with my lemonade stand. And, when I first put out my lemonade stand, I put it right in front of our house, like a lot of kids would do, right? And I wasn't getting a lot of business. And I noticed that one block down was the route that a lot of people took to get to the beach. So I loaded up my little lemonade stand onto my wagon and I pulled it a block down. And lo and behold, I did gangbusters business. So a second very important lesson that I learned was about, location, with real estate and with business, right? And I, proceeded apace with that. My first actual career was as a Chicago public school teacher, but I have often said that getting 7th and 8th grade kids to care about ancient Rome was the biggest sales job that I've ever had. So I've always been looking at ways to influence people to get on board with whatever, is the thing that I'm wanting to help them get with. And while I was a school teacher, I became a Mary Kay consultant. I'm sure a lot of us remember Mary Kay. She was one of the first direct marketing businesses out there that has now been copied many, many, many times. And it's, nobody does it as well as Mary Kay did. And I learned everything that I know about salesmanship from my time with Mary Kay Cosmetics. And I was actually in the top 1% of the worldwide sales force with Mary Kay. And I several important lessons that I learned from that time that are foundational to what I do now. One of the main ones, as when I was first beginning, I was, I hated it. I was really scared to go and do the sales. And at the time, I was also investing in real estate. So I had a lawyer and I was planning on, and she had ordered some skincare or whatever from me. And I was getting ready to go deliver it to her at her office. And so I had driven downtown and I was sitting in my car. And I also, Mary Kay had just launched a new anti-aging cream. There was a $100 set or something like that. And so I wanted to sell it to her along with the cleansing cream and the lipstick or whatever it was that she had already bought that I was getting ready to deliver to her. And at first I was like, what am I going to say to get her to buy this stuff? And I was feeling all of the stuff that a lot of people do when we are getting into sales. I was feeling the sleaziness and feeling the ick. And then it just popped into my head. Wait a minute. She is on this anti-aging product is as good as anything on the market. And it's 50% less than a lot of department store brands. And I'm getting ready to deliver it to her desk. Like, come on, this is not, and it just completely changed my whole vibe about what I was getting ready to do and made me realize I am here in service to her. This is something that she needs, she wants, she's happy to pay for, and I'm making it really super easy and beneficial for her in a bunch of different ways. And it just erased anything in my mind about a feeling that I shouldn't do it, or I'm being pushy, or this is sleazy, or any of the hesitation. And that core lesson has stayed with me forever. And it is foundational to what I teach now around salesmanship. And the core teaching that I offer now is what I call heal your sales wound. And I have identified 6 primary sales wounds that I'll run through real quick. And sales wound number 1 is the money wound. And that is a fear that money has more power in your life than you have over your money. Sales wound number 2 is the love and money wound. And this is the idea that love and money are intertwined in so many of our relationships. So love is never just love and money is never just money. That's a very limiting factor for a lot of folks. Salesman number 3 is and this is the crux of all of that yuck that so many people feel about salesmanship. Because the power wound, it's unique in that somebody who's suffering from the power wound is actually inflicting it on others. Whereas with all of the other wounds, if you're suffering from the wound, you're inflicting it on yourself. The power wound is I sales is a zero-sum game, and it's either me or you, and I damn sure I'm gonna make sure it's gonna be me. And so this is the crux of all of the forceful, abusive, sometimes even fraudulent stuff that gets embedded in salesmanship. And all of the rest of us who aren't like that, just we can't stand the idea of being that. Which brings us to sales wound number 4, which is the anti-selling wound. And it is this, I do not want to be pushy, obnoxious, and rude, so I'm not going to. I'm just not going to sell at all. And of course, if you don't sell at all, if you don't make offers, if you don't do follow-up, if you don't, reach out to people, you're going to go out of business. Or if you're a professional salesperson, you're not going to have your job for very long. Sales wound number 5 is the darkest of all the wounds. It is the prostitution, and it is the fear that people will perceive me as somebody who's only doing this for the money. And sales wound number 6 is the visibility wound. And this is, I want to be big, bright, and shiny, but I'm very afraid of doing that. And so this is what's held by a lot of people who have a message to share. They want to be impactful. A lot of people who suffer from the visibility wound are not very money motivated. They're much more service motivated. They want to help people, but they also are very afraid of what might happen. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of self-doubt embedded within the visibility wound. And all of this is, based upon my 20, almost 30 years now of being in salesmanship. And a lot of people will ask me, what is the primary sales wound that people suffer from? And it depends a little bit on where you're coming from. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you a professional salesperson? Are you a founder of a company? So on and so forth. But for entrepreneurs, certainly the primary sales wound is the anti-selling. It is this fear that, I don't want to be pushy, obnoxious, and rude, so I'm not going to sell at all. And at the core of that fear is a lack of self-belief. And a lot of people say, "Oh, no, 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 I believe in what I sell." Well, you don't really. And it's a little bit like the story that I told of when I was selling Mary Kay cosmetics. Because I on the surface I could say, "Oh, sure, this is a good, like selling this anti-aging cream that I want to sell. It has these benefits." And I could rattle through, my slide deck, so to speak, of this is all the positive things about this product. But it wasn't until I understood on a visceral level the true benefit, not just the features, but the real benefit. Specifically, this person truly wants this product. She's a woman of a certain age. She doesn't like those wrinkles. She would love to have something that gets rid of that. And it's a more economically priced than something else that I could sell her. And by the way, I'm delivering it to her desk at her office. And so when you understand that real value of what it is that you're selling, it allows you to stand in your own power and to recognize I'm not being pushy, obnoxious, or it unlocks everything as far as the anti-selling one goes. The second thing that I want to talk about, though, is around communicating. And this idea that, what so many people say to me, they are afraid of selling. Oh, I don't want to be pushy, obnoxious, or rude. It comes when they don't know what to say. They don't know what to write in their email. They've got to send a follow-up email, or they're trying to do a networking and they're, oh, I don't know what to say to get somebody to buy. And there's 2 routes that I talk about. One is if you're doing it in writing, and the second one is if you're doing it in person. So let's talk about in person first. So if you're doing networking, which is the primary method for lead generation for most small business owners, most small businesses don't have much of an advertising budget. And you shouldn't be spending a lot of money on advertising if you are a small business owner. So networking and referrals is the other way, but that a lot of what I'm going to say about networking applies to referrals as well. And then of course repeat business. Good job, and so people keep coming back to you. But if you're networking, a lot of people go into a networking event and think to themselves, okay, I want to go into this networking event for the purpose of making some sales because I feel the need to make some money this month, to add a couple new people to my register. And so they go into the networking event thinking, how do I get this person to buy my thing? And that's the completely wrong approach. You've got it backwards. Instead, you need to go into a networking event thinking, how can I most quickly find out what is important to this person? That's the thing that you need to be thinking about in your networking. What is the fastest way? What's the question that I can ask that will get me to the heart of what's important to this person right now? And you need to think about that question in terms of what needs to be important to them if they want to buy my thing. So you need to, it's a two-part, a successful networking is a lot about the preparation and thinking to yourself, what is it that needs to be true about somebody if they're going to be a good purchaser for whatever it is that I'm selling? And then once you know what is it that needs to be true, well, now what's a question that I can ask that finds out if that is what matters to them or not? And embedded within that is you have to be willing to hear no. And so many people have such a fear of hearing, and it's not just the no at the end of the sales conversation of like, I've heard your pitch and no, I don't want to buy. It's no's all along the way. A lot of people don't want to hear if I ask. So in my case, if somebody is going to be a good fit for my coaching, for example, they need to be somebody who is interested in making a real connection with their clients and customers, more so than just the money motivation. So if I ask a question like, what is it that is really driving you in your business? What is your goal for your business? If they start coming at me with their financial figures, I know that they're not a good fit for my coaching. And I have to be willing to hear that as a no. Oh, okay, great. That's so exciting. I hope you meet those goals. Lovely to talk to you. And then you turn and you talk to somebody else because you're trying to find out as quickly as possible if they are a good fit for you, whether or not the thing that's important to them is what matches you. And if it doesn't, be willing to walk on. Be willing to go on to the next person. So that's a communication strategy for when you're networking. Now let's talk and for addressing this anti-selling wound and the need to recognize your own essential core value. And that's why I say it's about the pre-work. It's about knowing what needs to be important to this person in order for it to matter to them. If you're doing it in writing. If you need to send an email, and let's say it's either your newsletter or you met somebody at a networking event and you got their business card and you thought, oh, maybe they could be a good fit. And so now I'm going to email them and to try to move this conversation along. A lot of people have a hard time with that particular piece of communication. And so what I suggest is that you start with radical transparency, radical authenticity. For example, hi, it was a pleasure to run into you at the South Park breakfast last week. And I'm following up with you now because I would love it if you bought my coaching. And I want to find out if you want to or not. Obviously, you're not going to send that email, but if you get out of the truth of why you're writing to them, I'm writing to you because I would love it if you became my next client. And then from there, allow yourself to go down a mental path of feeding your way back into, okay, what I want for that is for them to buy my coaching, and I want to find out if they would be into that. Well, now what else do I need to say to them? What else needs to be true here? And I find that that's a much better way to get into the writing if you start with radical honesty with yourself. That's why, and then the next thing, if that's not enough to click it for you, is to now write about what your fear is. So, hi, it was such a pleasure to run into you at the South Park breakfast meeting last week. I'm writing to you today because I would love for you to buy my coaching, and I want to find out if you'd like to do that or not. And of course, what I'm afraid of is that you don't want to hear from me because you don't have any interest in my coaching. And in fact, why would anybody be interested in my coaching? And so I'm wondering how cheaply I have to offer it to you in order to get you to say yes, because I'm a little bit desperate, right? As soon as that might actually be what is happening head, but you don't know that that kind of foolishness is stopping you inside your head unless you write it down. So this is not something that I came up with. I got it from Tara Moore, the author of a book called Playing Big, where she talks about the inner critic. And I got this lesson from her, this idea that as long, and I've expanded on it a little bit and worked it into some of what I teach, that your inner critic, this voice in your head that is actually possibly saying literally what I just said a moment ago. But as long as it's stuck in your head, it's really crafty and sneaky, and it stays in there, and it pretends like it masquerades as something that seems more reasonable, and you can't ferret it out. But when you write it down, now you can realize, oh, well, that's not reasonable. That's all pretty ridiculous. And it allows you to recognize the distinctions, the foolish, charming little self-talk that you're doing that's holding you back versus the legitimate object the person might have. It might be that you are in a place in your business right now where investing $2,500 a month for coaching doesn't make good sense for you. And if so, great, no problem. I do have some free options available as well, or low-cost options. You can join my group program that's only $250 a month. And so that's a legitimate objection. Or it could be, you've just hired somebody else to be your coach, and so you're working with them. Great, that's a legitimate objection. But that's not, I suck and nobody would ever hire me, right? And you don't know the distinction, write them down. A quick week for communicating in person, you want to make sure that you are not thinking about how you're going to get them to buy from you. You're thinking about, how can I find out as quickly as possible what's important to them and whether or not that is an intersection with what I do. And for writing and for communicating in writing, start with radical authenticity. Number one, write down what it is that I actually want. And number two, write down what my fears are. Like, I'm hesitant to send you this email today because I'm afraid that you're going to laugh at me and, you look for the delete button as quickly as possible, right?
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.